This is why it is so crucial to be a spiritual person, is because we know we're going to be faced with trials, tribulations, and tests. This is where Testament and the book comes from. The Bible is a manual to your experience and to you. It ties it all together. But we're going to be faced with ups and downs. With good and evil, and in the midst of this lies our spirit, which is our breath. How we can deal with these tests is how, whether we graduate or ascend. This is where these terms come from. How we graduate or ascend all depends on our spirit or our emotions. Because the emotions is what animates you. It's gonna, like I said before, it's what's gonna give you life, or it's gonna give you hell. All based on your emotions. Which is obviously tied into thoughts as well. The mind and emotions are one being, are one entity, which I get into again. But during the time of test is where our spirit comes into play. And when we fail these tests, when we worry with anxiety, when we live off of lack, when we live off of hate, because of certain tests that we're presented with, even pop quizzes, random things that happen, you'll be presented with. Your emotions, your spirit is what passes the test or not. You know how you use your emotions. This is how you pass the test. Because remember, we're gonna go through lessons. Lessons is what is gonna help you accumulate self knowledge or knowledge. You have to be aware of certain things that you go through. Because this is what is gonna make you into a better person. Whether you struggle with addiction or whether you struggle with insecurity, you have to be aware of these lessons because it's going to teach you about yourself. And so when a test arrives, when you're tested with these insecurities, you can use your spirit, you can use your emotions to pass the test. Because just like school, if you can't pass the test, they're going to keep repeating themselves. I'm telling y'all, I'm giving you all the gems on how to ascend. How I'm not talking about to fly out of earth, but how to ascend in your level of consciousness and your level of awareness to become this being that most people don't ever get a chance to become because we don't know what the human experience is all about. We must understand that in order to pass these tests, we have to be aware that we're first being tested. This is why awareness is the greatest attribute you can have in this game. Awareness is number one, not strength, not charisma, not speed. Awareness is the greatest gift you can have in this experience because it brings you out of any and everything. Whether you're in this down state, you're thinking negative, or whether you're addicted to something, or it doesn't matter. Awareness will snap you right out of it. Like, well, hold on, no, I shouldn't be doing this because this might cause this, cause an effect. I shouldn't be doing this because it might lead me here, or yada yada yada. Awareness. This is what awareness does. This is the power of awareness. It brings to your attention what needs to be corrected, or it brings to your attention what is around you. Awareness. And to be aware is truly a gift. It's truly a gem because you can never stay in depression. You can. Some people might not even ever have depression because of awareness. Addictions and long going cycles of lust and long going cycles of not getting sleep. Awareness is what digs you out of this grave. Awareness is what digs you out of the curse. Because you can't break a spell or a curse if you're not aware of it first. And so, when these tests come up, we must be aware of, okay, this is a test. So let me trust in the spirit, which is the unseen, so I can pass this test. So, okay, I might have some, I'm not saying to worry either, but I'm saying, like, if you have some bills coming up, and you're like, how am I going to do this? Anxiety, you're going to get through it. You know, God is going to make a way. He's going to get you through it somehow. It's not the end of the world, basically what I'm trying to say. You know, you have to be aware that, okay, this is a test. Let me relax and let me trust in the spirit. You know, again, the verse, to be carnal minded is death, but to be spiritual minded is life and peace. You know, because when these hardships or these tests come up, it's going to test the man, or it's going to test your mind. And in order for you to pass these tests, you have to first be aware of it. And okay, all right, this is happening. It's a test. You know, all these lessons that I went through, you know, all these videos that I watched, these books that I read, all this knowledge that I accumulated. Now let me use it on this test to ascend from it, to pass, to move on from it. You know, and you won't be tested just one time on a certain subject, as you know, in school. You'll be tested many times in many different ways, you know, through people, places, and things. You have to be aware of the test. I'm not saying to not enjoy life, of course, but with gifts come curses, you know, because there's duality and polarity to all things. You know, we must be aware of our gifts can easily be turned to curses by way of abuse or abnormal usage. And so we must be aware of these tests that come up so that we can ascend or graduate from them, you know. And we do this through willpower, which is our solar chakra, and why the chakras are called wheels of light, or wheels, because the solar chakra, your core, your seed, your center of your universe, is what directs the wheels to turn left or right by your willpower, by what you're willing to do and what you're willing to not do. You know, this is going to be for another video on, you know, turning the chakras right. Because right now they're all left. You know, this is what the tree of good and evil or knowledge means. The chakras are turned left. In order to get to the tree of life, or enlightenment, we have to turn the chakras right, because all 7 colors of the spectrum combined creates what? White light, which is milk and honey, the land flowing of milk and honey. The most glorious of all lands is the state of heaven. This is how you get to heaven. This is how you get to that state of consciousness, you know, which is a level of consciousness or bliss, you know, or what the book of life likes to refer to as immortality, which we'll get into as well. But this is how you turn these chakras right, because you're going to be tested by way of, you know, look up the 7 deadly sins. You know, these are going to test you because these are tied to the 7 chakras, you know, and in order to turn them right, you have to be calm. You have to be at ease. You can't be at dis-ease. When the test arrives, you have to be relaxed. You have to be in spirit. You know, you have to trust in the spirit. You have to know that everything is going to work out perfectly for you. You know, I am peace. I am abundant. I am joyful. You know, I will be abundant. I will be joyful. Because remember, will is a very, very, very powerful word. We like to say I am, but our will is so, so powerful because of what will is. Will is I am. And this is where the word William comes from. Will, I am. You know, because will is why the whole universe is in existence. You know, because remember, it's an intelligent energy. You know, and we'll get into that too. But willpower means everything. And this power is what is going to allow you to pass these tests, you know, by way of your spirit, by way of your emotions. Because remember, your emotions is animation, and animation is what gives life. The spirit is what gives life. In order for you to be spiritual minded, which brings life and peace, you have to trust in the unseen during the hard times. You know, during the times of struggle. You know, you see celebrities all the time getting in trouble. You know, money does not matter in this reality, you know, because when you leave here, you can't take money with you. You only take consciousness. You take what you acquired through consciousness, through divine consciousness, through self-knowledge. That's what you take with you. You know, you don't take money with you, because remember, money is energy. But currency in the physical state is an illusion. It's energy that will dissipate. But your energy, the the real currency or your flow of energy is within you. And this is the harmony. This is being at ease and not dis-ease. This is true wealth. This is what it means to be a prophet, where they get the term profit from, which is money. To be a prophet, which is to be one with the unseen. To know that everything is going to work out for you. To claim it in advance. Abracadabra. I will create as I speak.